And so right now in the house. We'll look at 11.3. I'll run through some of the key concepts, the definitions of some of these keywords that appears in the brochure or forum of the computer dollar model. Although stated Reserve Bank of New York, it actually means to replace the Reserve Bank of New York because it is a computer. So some of the concepts would be like BIS, DIFI, and distributed ledger technology concepts. And what is the American law on the criminal computer dollar model? So these are some of the concepts that appears in the computer dollar model on the forum. So it's not official. And it is also not legal, but nonetheless, we will discuss what are the concepts that was presented. So there are some keywords like permission and permissionless blockchain. So I will be using the IBM product to explain what is their definition of permission and permissionless blockchain. So, for example, a very good exemplary was given by the random node selection for permission blockchain document. So these are some of the different keywords that appears in this particular document. So the first one that we will be looking at will be permission and permissionless blockchain network. What is the meaning from their point of view? Second is the process of assigning unique identifiers, which I relate to and match it with the MAC, which is the media access controller that generates random numbers, which in turn is matched by the medical doctors that picked up the MAC from the mortuary. So that will be from another PowerPoint section, the medical evidence section worldwide. The third is blockchain nodes validation architecture, which also appears in the Computer Bank of England. Not the Bank of England, but the computer version. The fourth one is the random selection process, retrieving a hash from the blockchain with basic computation logic concept. The fifth concept, smart contract configuration, mediating server and digital signatures. The sixth concept is the API gateway. The seventh is distributed ledger or channel ID. The eighth concept is the meaning of new data block, because the word Genesis does appear. It's a replicated term across different computer, which they attach to a few of the BIS world cities names. Then we will just have a brief look at the very vague technical specifications under the WHO and WEF FALSE cert, using certain surnames, foundations. Nonetheless, it is a very vague document. Despite its subtitle as technical specifications, it can only be considered as a brochure. Then look at the IBM Hyperledger Fabric documents to discern what exactly is the meaning in computer language, and also how does it look like in a computer chip injected in brain. And also we will look at some of the VAX related documents in the other PowerPoint sections. When we look at the hospital synapse section, such as T-Mobile, T-System, Sprint. So then we will also look at the Hyperledger micro version in the medical evidence extract from a very comprehensive worldwide medical evidence compilation. So this is just a tiny recap from another section that I will be covering fully on the medical evidence collected worldwide. So the first definition concept, in order to understand the Computer Bank of England as well as the Computer Reserve Bank of New York, is the meaning of permission and permissionless blockchain. Clearly seen in this diagram here, it is part of a computer network. Under the permission distributed ledger technology, and following the Computer Bank of England document, it is under the key point number 2. It is much like a brochure as well. And what I did was I tried to expand what can this particular point 2 mean by matching it with product brand names that can possibly explain what this Computer Bank of England and the Computer Reserve Bank of New York brochures or forum were referring to, because it is just a brief brochure. So this diagram itself did not appear in neither of the Computer Bank of England and the Reserve Bank of New York. This is merely an expansion of what the keywords or term permission distributed ledger technology can possibly mean in both brochures. So using the IBM definition of permission and permissionless blockchain, so in the Computer Bank of England document, key point number 2, the brochure itself, it states that the permission distributed ledger model, the access to data is restricted. State information is partitioned across a group of permission entities, and no single entity possesses the ledger in its entirety. Also, the word permission in the criminal context can refer to the neurochip population 100 plus synapse. Because theoretically speaking, a microchip in an electronic device and a microchip introduced by graphene oxide and silicon oxide chip into the human brain can be what the Pope was contemplating when he drafted the permission and permissionless distributed ledger technology model. Which also matches the hospital synapse, but cover the T-Systems Spring Tech, starting with the Microsoft 666 pattern. To continue with the Computer Bank of England brochure, the PIPs maintain their own localized data repositories representing the individual slice of the system state. Information relating only to the transactions initiated or received. So to sum up this extract from the brochure of the Computer Bank of England document, key point number 2 is simply saying that when it comes to the definition of a permission distributed ledger technology, it will be spread across a group of permission entities. For example, by scanning the hyperchip, in order for the permission access to this group of individuals, and no single entity can possess the ledger in its entirety. That's the whole meaning of permission in the brochure Computer Bank of England. Point number 2. So what I did was I used additional documents to cross-reference. So I picked the IBM definition of permission, permissionless blockchain, random node selection for permission blockchain. And this is the diagram. You can see here. So in the IBM pattern, in figure 3A, it's permission blockchain network 300. So you can see here, that's a number. This is a number given to the blockchain network. And it is also called a permission. You can bear in mind the definition that I've just given from the Computer Bank of England brochure. It illustrates a permission blockchain network 300 that features a distributed, decentralized, peer-to-peer architecture. Looking at blockchain user 302, you can see him here. So, in figure 3A, he initiates a transaction through a client-side application leveraging on SDK, a computer term, a computer tool, directly through an API that connects to the permission blockchain 304, right in the middle, through a peer node 314. So these are the peers. Obviously, you can see that there is a exact match with the other cross-reference document from the WEF. And also, of course, the keywords reset will be explained in another PowerPoint section. So it connects to the permission blockchain 304 through a peer node 314 that retrieves the user's enrollment and transaction digital VAX certificates. This is the certificates. So this word certificate, when you shorten it, it becomes cert, and then you combine it with VAX cert. That is how the WEF and WHO VAX cert technical specification, which is not technical, strictly speaking, it's more like a brochure, came about. From Certificate Authority 316, so you can see there is a certificate authority in this model, in this IBM permission blockchain model, which manages user roles and permissions in order to transact on a permission blockchain 304. The user use chain code to verify credentials on the traditional data source 312. Who writes the chain code? The blockchain developer 310. Can see him here. The blockchain developer 310 can write the chain code, client-side applications, and deploy chain code directly to and I insert matching other IBM patterns, neuromorphic network 300. This is the network through an interface. Now, we can then move on to the second keyword definition and concept of what is permissionless. In a permissionless blockchain, anyone can join just by creating a personal address. You can interact with the network by submitting transactions, adding entries to the ledger, have the choice of running a node on the system, employ mining protocols, such as some personal details to assist with the verification. So suppose a being is microchipped in brain, in organ cells, that is your personal details. It is unlawful, and it can verify the transactions. So how do I know that it is organ cells? Cross-reference from a copied replica of an ancient chip remodeled under a new company name, IBM, copied by the brochure of the WEF. In the WEF Net Zero 2020 edition, the context is block and I insert organ chain of industries, because as you can see in the middle of this three-letter word WEF is the letter E, and E is short for economies. And economies just means all industries. So a block organ chain of all industries. The reason I know is because this is an ancient space map, and you can see very clearly that it is inbuilt into the Pentagon building design. And to simplify the explanation, it is the computer binary, because the computer binary is what is being used to program into space. And in religious context, it means the Star Stepper, monks, Tao. That's where you get the word Tao, which is actually Tao. And it is copied into the US $1. And this model is the meaning of pentagon. You can see it from the sideways to compare it with the flower petals. Right, there's 5 petals, the yellow part. And this is the top view. This is the top view of what it looks like. This is the side view. And the yellow emperor in the yellow court, he has full control over let's just digress a little bit to understand how come the Pentagon was designed with a replicated ancient space design. This is the wrong space design. It is a computer binary. Also depicted in the Book of Daniel. You have this that character Kingpin Babylon, and I would have already written in my document showing the glyph evidence, the linguistic glyph evidence of what exactly is the real and true meaning of Babylon. All the names in the Bible, they are real kings, but they are space kings, and their names have meanings. So he's not a baby. The word bear is ba, is a glyph word. So ba is a big snake wheel, right? Ba is a big snake. And B is also in glyph. It means comparison, measurement, the balance scale. That is why you see the woman on top. She's always holding a balance scale. And loon, right? Lawn is loon. So the loon is a glyph word and it means a wheel. And you are looking at the wheel right now. And in this wheel, it contains all the organs, which is jinx in the Star Stepper, copied into the US $1, and these are the organs programmed from the computer binary into outer space. And the only way to override a computer binary is truly the Bible code written by God, the correct God. So this is the decoded answer. This is the decoded short answer. Any further in-depth explanation will document it in a separate publication, separate academic publication in a separate field. So what I did was this is a very simplified answer. So I inserted the planetary system. This is a very simplified, just to have a quick overview and understanding of what this Babylon means. Babylon also just means the barcode. It is the barcode. The bar is the big snake space wheel. It is also the binary code. Both the Bible code and the binary code are programmed into space. So you can see here I inserted the planetary systems. So that immediately you understand, okay, the barcode or binary code or Kingpin Perp, he may or may not know this. I know this. He may not know this because it is, he copied, right? He built it into the architecture. He may not know how to undo this as well, how it locked the organs in and how to unlock it. It's possible that the perp don't know. So especially if he doesn't read the Bible and follow God's word. So here you see that, like, this is Mars, right? Like, this is the design of the Yellow Emperor is the design. And like, there's Mercury on this side, and there's Venus, Saturn, Jupiter, and it's mapped into all these organs. And as we unravel in this document, this Doctor of Laws document, you start to see that it is in a lot of other company patents. This anatomical organ scan and hashing, using the binary code. That's why it involves the organs. So this is will be probably further expanded in a separate academic document. Again, you can see this cross-reference in the WEF blueprint of the 2022 targeted at sections of control, because in this case, they are looking at the broad organ chain of all industries, which of course is unlawful, which is the story inside. It is, I can't use the word story. It is the word of God. So it is in the end, in the book of Daniel, when you complete reading and coding your brain with the book of Daniel, King Babylon's kingdom ended. It ended, present tense, in outer space forever. So you can see here that this is the Kingpin Pop. He's thinking of using a computer controller and a computer processor using microcomputers to net zero all the industries in order to accomplish his control of W meaning world and E is the, as explained, refers to all industries. It's simply just have, it's a con. So, right, so it is laid out in the document that these are some of the key areas that Pope was very interested in. And he copied this ancient replica, which it is also proven in some building architectures. And also because in order to run computer systems, you use the computer binary program into space, which is also copied onto the US $1 bill. You can also cross-reference this into some other products like banks. So you see that it is also copied into, for example, JP Morgan Bank. And you can just easily stick the quadrant chip from the Microsoft product. It fits perfectly into the JP Morgan Bank logo. Both are copied models and both refers to the outer space computer binary code. Also, again, you see inside the WHO and WEF FALSE document, which is really a brochure. Again, you see the four quadrant, and you can see that it is moving, it is rotating, because you can see that it moves from a quadrant to the next. So then it becomes a complete wheel. And it is a quadrant of elements. And the elements are, in a conceptual sense, utilizing the planetary systems. So what then is the permissionless distributed ledger technology? So I put in the word WF lotus petal diagram because the lotus pattern pawn photograph actually appears on the cover issue of one of the WEF document. So there is some connection because there is many there's many things that can be photographed, perhaps like factories, but it was a picture of a pond filled with lotus petals on the WEF brochure and website. So you can see this lotus pattern again, and we can use this as a concept to understand the permissionless distributed ledger technology. In the IBM document in an attempt to explain what the brochure Computer Bank of England can possibly mean when they use the word permissionless blockchain. So figure 3C illustrates permission blockchain network 350 with a transaction processed by a permissionless blockchain 352. So you can see that it is here 352 and including a polarity of nodes 354. See it? to determine if the transactions are valid based on a set of, I put in the word questionable, neural network rules. So these nodes could be neural nodes, not excluding the possibility of if the brain is microchip. So not excluding the possibility of microchip neural network, which is omitted from the IBM document in this particular document, but the neural network is registered under IBM series of documents in other IBM documents. So you can cross-reference these two sets of documents. Ascender 356, right? You can see him. He sends a TX transmission request. And a microchip can contain a cell phone. So just bear that in mind, although not explicitly stated in this document, but theoretically speaking, the circuitry in a microchip can be a cell phone. And the human body is a transmitter and is also a cell phone. These electronic products are merely a copy of the original natural mankind in their neuromorphic systems, axon, dendrites, synapse. It is merely a copy of the original mankind. So Ascender 356, meaning it is copying the principles of how transmission works of the original human brain, of the original entire human body system. So Ascender 356, let's just assume and put in the CO-VAX chip, population 100 plus synapses, desires to send some payment or some form of value, for example, any document like deed, medical contracts, medical records, contracts of goods and services, any asset. These are some examples that I'm putting in to illustrate what can the IBM document of this particular writer possibly refer to when he speaks of some form of value. So it can be any asset that can be encapsulated in a computer digital record. To the recipient 358, you can see recipient 358 here. He is perhaps in an office. He is a separate entity, a computer apparatus setup, robotic one, or he could be a person manning the computer systems. He receives all this form of value through the permissionless blockchain 352. Both the sender device 356 and the recipient device 358 have computer digital wallets. Bearing in mind again that it can refer to the VAX chip solidified cell phones in brain that is captured by a lot of medical doctors, evidence combined worldwide in different zones. So the user uses a interface. And we know that this interface is have this issue of being remotely programmable because it's a software. And there is a person, as I mentioned earlier, that designs and deploys the software, for example, updates. So there's a remote application programmable interface that then displays the transactions. And again, I put in the word questionable. because after the word transaction in this IBM document, it uses the word parameters. And we know that these parameters can refer to the connections of the neural nodes here. So in order to connect the neural nodes, you need to know the connections inside one human single being. So there is the parameters and vectors of the bodily cells. So that's why I insert the word transaction, and then I insert the word questionable, bodily, and close bracket, followed by the word parameters, which is mentioned inside this IBM writer, mentioned by him and in this document. The transaction is then broadcast throughout the permissionless blockchain 352 to the nodes, possibly many neural nodes 354. Or however, note that the recipient device can also be a COVAX cert individual or on behalf of a seller entity chipped with a micro cell phone constructed by microbots programmable by microcode remotely, as evidenced by the worldwide compilation of the medical photographic evidence. So what? So because suppose this is like a seller, what this means is that the seller is a company name, but the person manning the computer apparatus himself, representing as the seller himself, could be chipped with a micro cell phone, or he could be just a robot, for example, with a microchip or the computer itself. So depending on the permissionless blockchain 352, the questionable neural network. So every time I put in a questionable, I will put in, for example, in context could be the neural network, but the word neural is omitted from the word network. You cannot minus the possibility of in context in conjunction with the academic journal evidence, lab experiments, and lab conclusions and results that the graphene oxide and silicon oxide was an attempt to create an in-brain neural network. But this word neural was omitted, but one can insert the word questionable. Was the perp referring to a questionable neural network or neural lace? So depending on the permissionless blockchain, omitted word neural network, and then omitted word bodily, and then they put in the word parameters. The nodes use verification module 360. So that there is a verification module. So although it is not placed on the PowerPoint, I will just show it. Okay, so this is what it looks like. Okay, so there is a figure 3C. You can see here very clearly there is a verification 360, followed by structure, mining, distribution. So the verification module 360 to verify transaction based on rules. These are computer rules. These are not laws. This is not exactly lawful. So when the word rules appear, it just only refers to rules that applies only to computers. It applies to computer rules or logic program. So it's based on rules predefined or dynamically allocated, established by the permissionless blockchain 352 creator. So here we are trying to understand what is the concept and meaning of permissionless. For example, verifying identities of the parties involved, and notes 354 determines if the transactions are valid based on a set of omitted word and questionable neural. This word is omitted based on a set of network rules, meaning computer logic program, not the law. So in structure 362, let's look at, okay, yeah, it's actually here. Okay, so in structure 362, valid transactions are formed into a block and sealed with a hash lock. Again, questionable hashing or hash the bodily cells. This process is performed by mining nodes, the next step, using specific software that mine and create blocks for the permissionless blockchain 352. Among the nodes 354. Each block is identified by a hash, for example, a 256-bit number created using an algorithm. For example, I give an example and insert the possibility of the already mentioned RBM, short for the Ritz-Boltzmann machine algorithm. May not be the only algorithm. Neuromorphic system and other computation logic agreed upon by the permissionless blockchain network 350. So this is the permission, this is the permissionless blockchain 350. So this is the number 350 appears here. This is the permissionless version. With mining module 364, see here, the nodes try to solve the block with proof of work. What is a proof of work? It is a solution to a puzzle, for example, derived from the block's header, where the algorithm rewards the miners that solve problems, thus ensuring correct answers. The proof of work, short form POW, process, alongside the training of blocks, makes modifications to the permissionless blockchain 352, according to the writer, difficult because an attacker must modify all subsequent blocks for modifications to one block to be accepted. Then the successfully validated block is distributed with a distribution module 366 through the permissionless blockchain 352, and all nodes 354 add the block to a majority chain. The permissionless blockchain 352 auditable ledger. Transaction value submitted by the sender 356 is deposited or transferred to the computer digital wallet of the recipient 358. So this is the description, diagrams, a lot more content and explanation offered by the separate IBM document that can possibly explain the short description that are extracted from point 2 in the computer Bank of England, which is much like a brochure because it is very short. There's just some basic key that I can extract, and then I match it with some other documents, cross-reference as a plausible explanation of what the meaning permissionless distributed ledger technology can mean in this Computer Bank of England brochure-like short document. Hyperledger, so let me just look at, okay, because I want to cover some key concepts and then we can move on to 11.4. So Hyperledger Fabric, is it considered permissionless or permission? It can be an example of permission blockchain, and there's mention of the client will use a software development kit to send a transaction proposals of a smart contract with the name and input the smart contract transactions to endorser, untrusted peer nodes. Endorser speculatively execute the transaction, sign over the read-write sets, known as endorsement, and transmit the endorsements back to the client, which uses the endorsement to then construct a transaction. So these wordings here sounds like a robot, which is programmable. Transactions are sent by clients to an ordering service that batches the transactions into blocks disseminated to peers for validation, signed by other peers, correctly executed through sufficient number of peers according to security network assumptions, which is called the endorsement policy. So I'm not going to go in depth into this endorsement policy here. I just want to run through all the key and important concepts to explain the definition permissionless and permission that appears in these brochure likes and forum on the Computer Reserve Bank of New York and Computer Bank of England. Each peer maintains a copy of the database records, and no single peer can modify the database records without consensus being reached amongst the distributed peers. Whereas in the permissionless blockchain, it says anyone. Again, this is just a general description. So just take it as it's just a general concept by the document writer. Anyone can, quote unquote, it's like anyone, but it's just a general sense. Okay, so when it says anyone, it may not necessarily mean anyone. So anyone can participate without a specific identity. In contrast, a permission blockchain database provides secure interactions between a group of entities with a common business or funds exchange goal, but they do not fully trust one another. This is the definition of the writer of this IBM document, meaning it's not like a like another writer can define it differently. That is what I'm trying to say. Okay, now we look at the second concept, random node selection for permission blockchain. The second point, process of assigning unique identifiers, and I match it with the MAC injected. I simply just call it the MAC injected because it is emitting from dead corpse in the mortuary, documented by medical doctors, valid photographic evidence, all sorts of evidence, lab results. So it is, so this process of assigning unique identifiers as part of the permission and permissionless blockchain, to me, matching with evidence is the MAC injector. Because you can see that this block hash is the hashing of the body cells, which is not just neural, but it's the body organs, and it also appears in the Hospital Synapse series set of PowerPoint, the Microsoft hash, and using that product to explain the meaning of hash. So in 4B, we see that let's just look at how this writer explains the meaning of block hash and pseudo-random binary number, which is the programming language used, which is the binary code, which is what I've shown in previously. It is it's an ancient replica that you use the computer binary to program into space. So this second concept is what we will try to understand here. I'll explain. The process of assigning unique identifiers is the MAC injector. In figure 4B, we see a process of assigning unique identifiers to peer organizations. The blockchain network includes 16, so you see N equals 16 peer organizations. Each peer is assigned a unique identifier. Thus, the 16 organizations may be assigned values from 0 to, in a table, they have unique IDs 450. You can see that there are 16 organizations here as an example, with unique IDs, each represented as a decimal value or binary values. Figure 4C, let's look at figure 4C. Illustrates the process 400C of breaking up random binary number 440 into binary bit segments 441. Right, so you can see the top table here is the pseudo-random binary number. Right, so 1011. And then it will be broken down into binary bit segments 441, having a size based on the number of organizations, for example, 16 in this case, in the blockchain, and identifying endorser nodes. For example, random number 440 has 256 bits, same as hash value 430, yeah, used as the seed. So then it goes into some details how this writer believes how it works. So the client 420, right, the client 420 will segment the random binary number 440. Into smaller chunks, bit size based on the number of organizations. And then they start to use algorithmic function log. The bit segments 441 converted into decimal value, mapped into one of the new unique identifiers 450. So these are the, right, then it will be mapped to the unique identifiers ID 450 of the peer organization. So then some simple examples. This is what he claims. Meaning, like, you're not staring at his computer right now, but this is what he's trying to explain how it works in the algorithm. So he says, for example, the first bit segment has a random number of 1011. Right, you can see here, they take down this bit, converted into a decimal value of 11 that maps to peer organization 12. So the unique ID is 11. This process is repeated until enough unique IDs and corresponding organizations are identified to satisfy the endorsement policy. Okay, so I think I'll stop on this endorsement. I think it's quite enough to totally understand the general and basic concept of how it can be explained according to him. Okay. So now we'll just take a look at the backside. So this is the brochure that I was talking about, and in this brochure, it is not considered really a technical specification because of it is more like just a brochure, but nonetheless, I was able to just get some diagrams and concepts overview because it's a brochure, so it will not be like more detailed, which I try to cross-reference to fit and explain how it can possibly explain what is the meaning of blockchain and permissionless and permission blockchain in both the Computer Reserve Bank of New York and the Computer Bank of England. So then I cross-reference with the WEF, WHO, and then they add some surname foundations, which I find is more like a brochure. It's not detailed technical specifications. But nonetheless, as I mentioned, I was able to just get one or two that I find is can be a useful very tiny little big, but serves as some useful diagrammatical concepts of how it states here the digital signature verification works. And this is the only thing that I can get from the document. So as a cross-reference, so the diagram illustration provided by the VAX cert WHO and WEF document looks like this. So I took it out. And you see here that this is the signer. They calculate the hash from the document. So the calculation is computer binary. And then the hash is this, the binary code or the barcode scan. Digitally signed hash, then you show this. And then finally you get a digitally signed hash document. And then there's a validation. So then this is a separate document, right? But it's like a cross-reference because you can see that there is a validation here. When they match the matching hash indicates the valid document, contains the information that was signed with the private key. So you can see here that this separate document, WEF, WHO, diagram extract that I was able to get also is like a cross-reference for what I explained earlier, that there is a verification or validation process going on here in both the permission and the permissionless blockchain. So issuing a DDCC is a bit like, because it says, you can see here the document hash, and then the document hash, the digital signature can be the map injector, because this is how the unique identifiers are being assigned from the computer binary program into space. Right. This is, you can see here, this is the pseudo-random binary number in 10111, and then you see it here, right, like the document hash in the VAX, the WHO and the WEF FALSE cert on how the digital signature verification works. So this is just a short recap, because I'm going to do an entire PowerPoint section compiling some of the notable medical evidence spread across different continents. So this is just a small extract of the worldwide compilation of medical evidence. So there is a perfect match between a real injectables medical evidence, which I recognize as the hyperledger. Because although it's not explicitly stated, no one said that this is the hyperledger. To me, my first response is this is the hyperledger, because without even before I even know about the IBM brand, because it's an ancient replica, and it works on the same principle. So you can paste any company name or even DIY brandless, as long as the ancient replica is copied, right? You can just name it anything, or some DIY person do not want to be known at all. But when I look at the medical evidence, I recognize it as the hyperledger. Hyper is snake, right? So it's an outer space computer binary, or ledger like account for transactions, store of value. And it is noted in the medical evidence reports that the fabric, you can see that it looks like a fabric, right? Like it's like it's like a cloth, it's bendable. It is also noted in the medical evidence observation that there's a lot of metallic-like materials because of its angular structures. It's like metallic material which matches with like silicon oxide. There's metallic materials because like you require metallic materials for circuitry. So it is noted in the medical evidence observation that it is metallic, but yet you can see that it is like a fabric, right? Like when you pile all the metals together, it becomes like a fabric. So the detailed explanation and of this of what you see in this more microscopic evidence like this will be further examined with cross-reference from other as explained by as registered under different telecommunications companies. They contain some documents explaining how how circuitry works in principle. But if I were to enlarge some of these, there's many items inside this more microscopic material, which I recognize as the hyperledger metallic fabric, which is graphene oxide liquid form, microcircuit solidified core powered by the neural cells inside A to Z population 100 plus neural grid. Laid out also, the word neural grid appears also as registered in for example, a company brand. So if I enlarge some of these, it can be explained using some alternative authors and writers registered under some telecommunications brands, because this is how circuitry works. And so then you can see that there is a perfect match, for example, registered under a certain computer brand like IBM. It states that this is a silicon neuron. And neuron, it refers to neural, refers to the brain. And this is injected into the brain. It goes into the organs, the hyperledger fabric or metallic fabric in the silicon neuron. And this is the exact evidence from Pfizer injectable drying on a microscopic slide. And this is only just a small piece of evidence. There are many, many such evidence across all continents. And it is a perfect match with the silicon neuron registered under the IBM. And it explains in this IBM document, it explains that it is a core with 23 million transistors at a size of 180 nanometers. And it is a complementary metal oxide semiconductor. It states very clearly, it is very explicit on the number of transistors. It wasn't omitted. It just says it is laid out. It has 23 million transistors. And it is clearly laid out what is the specific size is 180 nanometers. And what is it exactly? What are some of the materials contained? It is named as complementary, and the material is metal oxide, which perfectly matches the silicon oxide. Laid out in some other academic journals. Not in the medical evidence, but it matches other academic journals, lab results, which I will also explain in that same section. Semiconductor 12 by 14 nanometer square. Okay, and so this is just a recap. So what you see here will be explained in a separate PowerPoint section, purely dedicated to explaining how this silicon neuron works. So this is just a recap and extract. So here is the medical evidence of a hyperledger metallic fabric graphene oxide. So it's here, and so I was just about to say that in the expansion of my explanation in a separate PowerPoint, this is just a recap and a short comparison, a perfect match, that can see that there is a vertical axis and there is a horizontal axis. Meaning, this is how you do the pinpoint, right? Because you need a vertical axis and a horizontal axis in order to be able to pinpoint the axon, dendrites, and synapse in the silicon neuron. So this is just a short but important point statement that I want to make at this point, because there will be a PowerPoint section fully dedicated to explaining this, separate from the medical evidence, which is a separate PowerPoint section. So the other point that I will also be making in the hospital synapse is in some of the patent writers is that the VAX cert is actually not required for electric shocking because this VAX cert is the hospital synapse, right? It's injected into a human brain, but it's actually not required for e-shock because theoretically speaking, the Wi-Fi can just go into the meat that you eat, that you take out from the fridge. The fridge can also be programmed to be a building system because it runs on electronic circuitry. So that I will also be using some documents to explain theoretically that it can work, but it's not lawful. And then so the fridge is, if it can be used for electronic building, then it can also be a reception point. It's a receptor for radio frequencing the meat itself, which is then ingested into the human body. And you also will see evidence that the mortuary corpse, they were already dead. They have meat, right? Like the human body is meat. So the dead human meat is emitting Mach numbers. So this proves that you don't need the VAX chip for electroshock. You can ingest it from binary program meat stored in a fridge, which is capable, proven by some documents of other registered company brands. For example, that theoretically, the fridge itself can be a program for billing. So the fridge itself can program the meat ingested as a transmitter and receiver of frequency or computer binary. So here the IBM silicon neuron, just a sum up encapsulating what this chip here contains is 5 resets. And you see this word reset in the WEF slogan, which again is a slogan, a Q lingo. It's not, it's like a brochure. It's not clearly, explicitly, extensively explained in its full technical specification. So this chip here is laid out clearly that it contains 5 resets. And it generates DAC reference current. It states clearly that it generates current, electricity. Okay, so here we will look at another concept. So cross-referencing to understand this diagram that appears in the brochure like Computer Bank of England, I cross-reference it with the figure 2A of IBM permission block and fill in the blanks, questionable cells or bodily organs from an ancient replica, also exhibited in, it's copied into some architectures. Block cells organ chain with API. There is application code, application programming interface appears on both. It can be cross-referenced and explained with a more detailed technical discussion registered under a particular product brand, for example, IBM, in explaining the word permission, which appears in the short brochure of the Computer Bank of England, the keyword permission. permission blockchain. So this is the exact, it states here very clearly, figure 8, illustrative conceptual model for the UK CBDC. It is taken directly from the sample brochure of the Computer Bank of England. It is the exact diagram that I took out, and it looks like this. There is a programmability alias, and these are some keywords that will be explained in more fuller discussion and technical explanations offered by different, registered by different company brand names. I think in 11.4, discussion and explanations. So you can see programmability, alias, service, and the API layer from the brochure Computer Bank of England, and then there's the PIP and the ESIP, which is just reduced to a computer chip, controller, computer apparatus, the entire Computer Bank of England. And then I cross-reference it to another separate document registered under IBM. You can, in my opinion, it looks to me like the same thing. Possibly also because that is how computer systems work. So you can see here there's applications, there's application code, there's a read-write data, and then these are the permission and permissionless blockchain that is mentioned in the Computer Bank of England. And there's the infrastructure and the blockchain platform. So figure 2A shows a blockchain architecture configuration 200 that contains a group of blockchain peer nodes 202, as discussed earlier. That participate in the validation process. So just to recap, the blockchain configuration comprises of application programming interfaces API to access and execute stored application code 220, for example, chain code, smart contracts, and it also consists of cryptographic trust 218, virtual execution environment, which will be explained using Sandbox. The blockchain layer 216 provides interface access to virtual execution environment required to process the program code. Okay, let's look at another concept. Figure 4A illustrates the process 400A of retrieving a hash from a blockchain 410. You can see the blockchain 410 here. For use in randomly selecting endorser organizations. The random peer organization selection process is performed by a client 420. Okay, that submits a transaction for storage on the blockchain 410. The block hash must be retrieved from blocks, including within the last 5 blocks. The target interval constraint may specify a predetermined number of blocks or block interval value 412. So what this just means is that it's programmable. Because T may not be 5, the block interval may be any other number that the programmer decides to specify. Okay, so just stop here. This is enough to understand this concept. Okay, now we look at another concept. Figure 6C illustrates a system 650. Okay, so this is the system 650 configured to utilize a smart contract 630. So smart contract is a keyword. It also appears in the Computer Bank of England brochure-like document. And we use this IBM document to cross-reference and explore what it can possibly look like in a diagrammatical format that represents the process or procedure driven by a smart contract. Because we know that in a financial context, bank transactions, a contract will usually, I mean, the word contract means agreement, but usually it's referring to it will entail some asset transfer. So in this case, since it is a smart contract, it is a computerized process or procedure, and how it can uh, how it looks visually, the flow inside the computer system. So there is a mediating server 654 that executes the operations and results of the smart contract written to the blockchain 620 as a blockchain transaction. So what are some of the contents of the smart contract? Just quickly run through. It can possibly contain digital signals or digital signatures by one or more entities, 652 from user device 1 and 656 user device 2, who are parties to the smart contract, which resides on the blockchain 620, which can be one or more computer servers, processors, memories, wireless communication devices. Okay, I think that is enough to understand this concept. Okay, then we look at the keywords application programming interface gateway. And you also see this keyword gateway in the T-System European Gateway Service, which is exactly this diagram that I took. This diagram here that you see 6 point is exactly taken from the T-System European Gateway Service brochure. Right, you can see this, right? This is taken exactly from directly an extract that is useful in understanding. So it's a 6 point. This and I added from the European Space Agency how it conceptually can look like with a European Space Agency endorsed satellite hovering over a 6 point because this is telecommunications, right? So you require things like a center point, and you require like connections or vectors, and then you get a reception from the space satellites hovering in outer space. So I combine these two to give a conceptual understanding of how it works from the T-System European Gateway Service, and I cross-referenced it with the explanation, technical, more detailed explanations registered under the IBM, this particular writer, on the API gateway. in order to understand what the brochure Computer Bank of England's API layer can possibly mean, because it all works more or less on the same principles, space principles, and telecommunications reception. So here you see under figure 60, the illustration system 600. So you can it's cross-reference the API gateway, and the application programming interface API gateway 662 provides a common interface for accessing blockchain logic, computer logic, for the smart contract that I was explaining previously, here 630. Or chain code and data distributed ledger, performing transactions, for example, on the blockchain by connecting one or more entities 652. You can see here that user device 1652 and user device 656 to a blockchain network peer. On the server 654. So you can see here the server 654. This is the useful diagrammatical illustrations to explain the concept, cross-reference and register under a separate company, IBM, that holds a copy of the world state. So it states that this server 654 can hold a copy of the world state, and a distributed ledger allowing the client 652 and 656, the separate user devices, to a blockchain network peer, server 654, component that holds a copy of world state, and the distributed ledger allowing these two clients to query data on the world state and submit transactions to the blockchain network. Endorsing peers run smart contracts. See here. Okay, so this is a very good diagrammatical illustration to connect how it flows in a API gateway. Okay, so this will be space. So I continue writing my paper that some space law and space technology will be connected to this. But for now, we just understand all the key and important concepts in order to understand some of the keywords that appear in the Computer Reserve Bank of New York and the Computer Bank of England brochure-like document with all these keywords and very short extracts. So I cross-reference with what it can possibly mean using alternate documents. Okay, next concept is the distributed ledger 720. You can see it here. And see here, there's a channel ID and a node 712 that receives new block 730 for storage on 720 distributed ledger. And also the other reason why I chose this diagram offered is because of the word Genesis. Because this word Genesis appears in one of the BIS projects, or rather the BIS Innovation Hub project. So this is the key reason why I feel that it is important enough to put up this diagram. So figure 7a illustrates the process 700, you can see here, of a new block 730 added to the distributed ledger 720. Client submit transactions to transaction blockchain nodes 711. Right, it's ordering service, and the client submits the transactions to the blockchain node 711, 712, or 713. The blockchain node 712 is a committing peer that received new data block 730. For storage on blockchain 720. The first block in the blockchain is referred to as the Genesis block. The architecture of the blockchain network is designed such that specific implementation of the ordering service 710 is a pluggable component. Contains a cluster of orders and accepts endorsed transactions committed to the distributed ledger 720. For example, 710 initiates a new data block. 730, as mentioned, broadcasts to committing peers 711, 712, 713, and each of them validates, as mentioned in the flow earlier on, the validation process, also mentioned in the hash vector validation, useful small extract diagram in the WHO and the WEF document, validates the transaction within the new data block 730. By checking to ensure the existing read set and write set, right? So earlier on I showed the read write set. Yeah, you can see here the read write and matches. This looks like an exact copy. The Computer Bank of England brochure-like document. By checking to ensure that existing read-write set matches or is identical to the current world state in the state database 724. You see here very clearly, it states the word world. So, it's just plainly stated there. More on the world state database 724. Upon committing peer validation of the transaction, it is written to the blockchain 722. On the distributed ledger 720, the world state database 724 is updated with write data from the read-write set. If the transaction fails, if the committing peer finds that the read-write set do not match, the transaction ordered into a block is still included, but it will not be updated. So what it describes here is computer logic. It's changeable because it's programmable. So this is not exactly like a fixed rule. It's not really legitimate in that sense, first of all, because it is just, yes, you can see very clearly just a set of computer servers, computer processors, computer controllers, which is omitted from the law. It was just sort of like the whole chunk of this gap, missing gap and loophole for maybe at least 20 years, right? So, okay, let's look at another concept. The new data block structure 730 and header 740 and transaction data 750 and block metadata 750. So to connect the previous data's the diagrammatical concept, figure 7a, then you add on figure 7b, the new data block structure. What does it look like when you zoom in and enlarge on the new data block 730? Okay, I zoom in and then I enlarge it. What does it look like? So this is what it looks like. The new data block 730. So figure 7b above illustrates the new data block structure 730 stored on blockchain 722 of the distributed ledger 720. So the distributed ledger is here. You zoom in on the new data block structure 730. This is what you see stored on the blockchain 722. The dotted lines that the blockchain 722 with multiple data segments, block header 740, block data 750, and block metadata 760. The new data block 730 with block header 740 in figure 7b add-on includes a hash link of the previous block's header, blockchain 722. So, okay, let's look at the block header first. Okay, we will just zoom in and large version. Let's just have a quick run of inside the computer network system. What it comprises of under the block header 740. So that's just the first thing that we will examine. The new data block 730 contains transactional information of n number of transactions from, for example, 1 to 10 to 100 to 500 to 1,000 to 2,000 to 3,000, for example, within the block header 740, which you can see contains a unique block number assigned in various orders. Can be incremental, it can be sequential order from 0 and a hash of the block data 750 of the new data block 730. So let's also look at what is the new data block, n number of transactions block data 750. So let's just look at this here now. The transaction data includes one or more types of transaction. You can see here type, a version, a timestamp, a channel ID of the distributed ledger 720. A transaction ID, payload visibility. There will be a chain code data, the chain code path that deploys the TX, which is transaction, the chain code name and the chain code version. There is an input chain code and functions, the client creator identifier such as the public key and certificate, the client's signature, chain code events. Okay, let's move on to endorser data. Identifies the endorsers, the endorser signatures, proposal hash, response status, namespace. Okay, let's move on to the read set. Read set list of key and version key read by the transaction. And then there's a write set, right? Remember just now I mentioned some of these read by the computer. So there's a write set list of key and value, a start key N key, a list of keys, a Markov tree query summary. And then there is a block internal value. 752 used to verify randomized and dorsal node selection process performed using a block hash value from a block within the block interval value 752. So remember early on, I mentioned that it is programmable. You can specify what is the interval number. It can be more than 5. Stored in an immutable log of blocks on the distributed ledger 720. So this is like an enlarged zoom in on what this new block 730 can. Okay, so then I wanted to highlight this metadata because this exact word also appears in the Computer Bank of England as the heading, the brochure-like short document with some basic descriptions with the word analytics. It also appears in their blueprint. You can see here. Right, there's an analytics hub. So what I did was, so looking at the Computer Bank of England brochure-like document, there is a useful diagrammatical illustration containing the word analytics hub, but it has also a descriptive portion, a very short one, which I extracted, which states, and I'll read out, collection and analysis of operation metadata and aggregated data anonymized, which also I will insert because like it's a legal question, like it's questionable. So I put that in as a legal note. The analysis of operational metadata that supports efficiency of the bank provided core ledger. This is the exact blueprint from the Computer Bank of England brochure, and you can see very clearly here that it contains the word core ledger and API layer. So what I've just read is from the descriptive relevant extract from that Bank of England brochure. And it continues to say, thus an engineered data pipeline could collect the relevant data from both the core ledger here and the API layer. So then I cross-referenced it with the other writers on the subject on metadata, and you can see it here diagrammatically as well. And it is an enlarged zoom in of the new block 730 from the distributed ledger 720. So what is the meaning of metadata? So we will just look at the conceptual understanding in metadata 760. Okay, so you can see here very clearly, right? There is, and I will just quickly run through. On the 760, the block metadata 760 stores multiple fields of metadata, meaning, for example, byte array, which includes last offset persisted of an ordering service that ordered the block the orderer added by the ordering service 710. Signatures on block creation, a reference to a last configuration block. A transaction filter, which, for example, refers to a byte array of a size equal to the number of transactions in data block 750. Yeah, you can see here the letter N symbolic and representing the number of total transactions, and validation code identifying valid and invalid transactions. So it's like a computer, he has rules programmed by a programmer, and that tells him, okay, I want you to look at these rules that I've just given you and please identify what will be considered valid and invalid transactions within the block. So the committer of the blockchain node, for example, 712 here, and it's linked to the previous diagram. You can see there's like blockchain node 712, which is enlarged, right? 712, 711, 713. Add validity or invalidity information based on which I previously discussed to a sufficient enough level to understand what is endorsement policy, and then there's verification of the read-write sets. So this is the block metadata 760. Let's look at another concept. The transaction flow using cryptographic credentials to produce signature. Cryptographic credentials to produce a unique signature for a transaction proposal. Figure 2b shows transaction flow, which includes transaction proposal 291. So it starts from here. It's like a cross section of the sequential flow. So we can see here that 291 is here, is the transaction. And sent by the application client node 260 to endorsing peer nodes 281, 283, so on and so forth. For example, the application client 260 randomly select endorsing peer organizations based on a hash value. So I'll highlight this word, retrieve from a block of the blockchain. For instance, the blockchain can be converted into a binary, meaning computer binary random number broken up into bit segments, which is shown earlier on, right? See. Right, it's broken off, right, into bit segments. Slice of binary random number used to identify K endorsing peer nodes. Second, transmit transaction proposal 291 to endorsing peer nodes to verify the client signatures and execute a chain code function to initiate the transaction output, chain code results. A set of key or value versions read in the chain code read set and a set of keys or values written in chain code write set. The proposal response 292, so you can see here. Send back to the client 260 along with endorsement signature if approved. The client 260 assembles the endorsements into a transaction payload 293, you can see here, and broadcasts it to an ordering service node 284. So these are all like transmissions and receptions nodes for consensus and orders transactions into blocks. Disseminate blocks to all peers 281 to 283 on a channel. The client 260 assembles the endorsement into a okay. I will just move on to the cryptographic credentials or unique signatures. The client 260 include an application leveraging a supported software development kit SDK, which is it is registered under, it is placed on for example, and the IBM portal. So it is laid out clearly that this is a software development kit, and short form is called SDK, which utilizes an available API to generate a transaction proposal. Third, request to invoke a chain code function so that the data can be written to read written to the ledger. That is, write new key value pairs for the assets. Fifth, package the transaction proposal into architect format, protocol buffer over a remote procedure called RPC for short, and take the client's cryptographic credentials to produce a unique signature for transaction proposal. Okay, let's look at another concept now. So what I've just shown is the transaction flow using cryptographic credentials to produce a unique signature using an alternate diagram to a side view. It's like a cross-section side view. Previously, it was like a top view, right? We're looking at the top views. And then we zoom in to look at what it looks like on a nanometer micro scale. And then this is more like a little bit like a timeline side cross-section view, what it looks like. So now we look at the quantum key distribution. So again, the reason why I put this up is because of the word quantum. Figure 8A illustrates 800 of blockchain 810, which stores machine learning or artificial intelligence data. The host platform 820, for example, it can be a cloud platform, an industrial server, a web server, a PC, a user device that builds and deploys a machine learning software, neural networks, relies on the vast quantities. For example, by the meaning vast quantities, meaning sift through millions of records of historical or training data stored on assets themselves on blockchain 810. This is just to understand, first of all, before we look at other issues for discussion. But now we just want to understand how it works in the first place. So historical or training data are stored on assets themselves on the blockchain 810. So this is the blockchain, a simple diagram here. 810. To build predictive models or improve predictive process monitoring of assets, 830. You can see here, assets here. For example, machine or equipment. And the writer of this document pattern here, he thinks that it is applicable to, because like he is a pattern writer, right? So he will have to like, if he believes that it is capable of doing so, he will have to suggest how like his pattern can be sold in different areas. So he suggests that it can be applied to aircraft. And I put it down because aircraft is a very important thing, right? So aircraft, locomotive, turbine, medical machinery and equipment, oil and gas equipment, ships, vehicles, non-tangible assets, for example, stocks, currency, digital coins, insurance, and so this is like how like patent writers, they have to sell what they patented. So I have to also then itemize and look carefully at what are some of the issues that can be open for discussion to improve training process 802 of the machine learning model. Figure 8B. Let's look at figure 8B now. Okay, it's here. 850 is a quantum secure blockchain 852, which implements quantum key distribution, or QKD for short. So we want to just have a strong and clear idea when you look at short forms QKD. Okay, so it's the quantum key distribution, and you can look at this visual as a useful diagrammatical encapsulation of what is QKD, the quantum key distribution. He claims that it can protect against quantum computing attack, but I think in the end, it just means that it can be programmable, even by anyone. So there's this legal problem as well. For example, the blockchain users verify each other's identities using QKD by sending information using quantum particles, for example, photons, as in like atomic level photons. For example, blockchain users verify each other's identicals, right? So using quantum particles, photons. For example, there exists 4 nodes. Each pair of the users share a secret key called QKD. Thus, there will be 6 different secret keys. It can be arranged in different formats. That is, it's not here, but that's why they put like a formation like this where there are like different users. Each of them have a secret key. Except of course it's not really secret because like for example, if I'm like the person I just overlook over the computer system, I will look at all their secret keys, for example, or they put like a robot or a computer to run it. So anyway, let's just look at the secret key report. Just put it down. Okay, so this is just a diagrammatical illustration of what a secret key can look like for the quantum key distribution formation. And logic again. Okay, so that's 6 different. So let me just repeat to recap. For example, the blockchain users verify each other's identities using QKD. QKD short for quantum key distribution using quantum particles, for example, photons. There exist 4 nodes, and each pair of the users share a secret key QKD. Thus, there are 6 different secret keys, and this is just like a symbolic representation of how the secret keys can be arranged or rearranged, are used, and each pair create a QKD by sending information using quantum particles such as photons, which cannot be copied by an eavesdropper. This is suggested by the patent writer as to how he will have to explain like the keyword secure. Okay, so some of the pin or finger tag law that I call it, some of the legal analysis will be in my original document. And for now, I just want to explain some of the key concepts that appears in the brochure like Computer Bank of England document, extract it out, and then we just explain it using other registered companies plausible explanation of how these this Computer Bank of England and Computer Reserve Bank of New York can mean for some of these key concepts. So I will just skip some of my a large chunk of all the legal analysis. Just want to look at all the keywords and the key concepts. Okay, so here we will, in addition to the IBM document on how the Computer Bank of England and Computer Reserve Bank of New York can possibly mean when you come across all these keywords, I also chose the Bank of America because they also give their version of what they mean by the definition distributed ledger technology in the Bank of America document system for implementing a distributed ledger across multiple network nodes. So here is a useful pictorial depiction of how it can look like for a centralized clearing network system and a decentralized blockchain network system. And then you get to see the word distributed ledger. This is centralized. You can see that this is decentralized. And here is a definition given by the Bank of America version for cross-reference. So the Bank of America defines distributed ledger technology as cryptocurrencies, which again can be cross-referenced with the Microsoft 666 pattern, which also involves the BoE cells, parameters and vectors connection, and then an e-reward system. So there will be a separate categories of telecom companies that I placed together in one separate section. So according to the Bank of America definition of distributed ledger technology, cryptocurrencies are based upon decentralized distributed ledger technology using blockchain, whereby transactions are mathematically authenticated by a network of computers performing complex checksum calculations, not by one centralized authority, as you can see on a figure 6a, but rather a blockchain system whereby the transactions are authenticated by a network of computers and they do complex, it could be like, for example, some programming algorithm, checksum calculations. There is no third party to oversee the transactions. This is the distinction made by the definition offered from the Bank of America's perspective. There is no third party to oversee the transactions. And some feature they included is that there is no banking facility to take a cut or charge interest. So that is the Bank of America's version of explaining what the distributed ledger technology means. Okay, so this is a short recap of the Bank of America system for implementing distributed ledger technology, multiple network nodes. This is just a conceptual extract of a diagram, which I explain in full detail in a separate section concerning pertaining to law, because this will be a very useful diagram to explain some legal issues concerning the user's rights, because you can see here that this is an author registered on the Bank of America. This is how he explained, but I would use his diagram because it is a very good and useful explanation for both parties, the end users and what can be implemented to see like what are some of the issues, because you can see here very clearly in this diagram, it's not explained in full. I explain it in full in my document and in some other sections, not this section here, which is focusing on the criminal variant models of the brochure, like Computer Bank of England, Computer Bank of Russia, and the Computer Bank of Reserve Bank of New York, and the PowerPoint 11, the final PowerPoint before I move on to the final conclusions and a short judgment, is that you can see here the levels of authentication, which is what the users, paying customers have a very big problem with, because they can see very clearly that this is a useful diagram to illustrate. It's a very good diagram that there's a way to put in soft zero, and hard authentication. So this is a very good diagram because it lays out very clearly that there are varying levels along the scale, like the balance scale. So like on the extreme left is zero authentication, no credentials required. On the extreme right is hard authentication, full credentials required before a transaction can pass. And this is the soft authentication range on the balance scale. The minimum credentials required, moderate credentials, not full, and then there is the full credentials required. So what this means is that it is programmable logic, because like I can choose to say for certain very, very important transactions, I require full credentials. And for some other much less very trivial, like routine, repeatedly recurring, maybe I will program it. Not I, but I'm just saying that the programmer can just consider maybe minimal credentials required. And so this is the legal reason why computer money can never be money, because it is not money, it is computer money. It is not like money owned by the person, but rather it is like a computer that is programming all these things in. So there's this very big problem of a grid rooted in identity, and then it is like doing all this programming over like the end user when he wants to carry out a transaction, and some end users will be very, very uncomfortable about this sort of arrangements, because it will be the end user, some of them with large sums of money, they will feel that perhaps it is a lot more comfortable if there's not so much of these complex programmings from technical people, because some people are just not very technical, very big investors. So some of them may be a very, very non-technical person that just want a very comfortable way of transactions conducting. So this is making it very, very complex. And so this is just a short but very good understanding of the varying levels of authentication related issues, but there is actually a full explanation in my document, written document, and also in explaining some other sections. Okay, let's look at another concept before we finally wrap off with the American law on this. Is this exemplary diagram? Okay, so this is just what I just mentioned, that some end users will feel that it's very oppressive. It's also, it is not really considered money, because it will be like a computerized digits of their money, and it's like a control grid rooted in like identity. And so this, I just mentioned that. And now we can look at the final. Okay, so the distributed ledger app. So this diagram is put up because it is an alternate cross-reference by, firstly, because of the ability of Bank of America to give a definitive explanation and definition of what distributed ledger technology can mean, and also able to come up with a diagram of what it can look like inside a mobile phone, which is the distributed ledger technology application. Right. So also like just a quick one that's this programmable e-wallet. So it's actually not money at all. It's just computerized digits. So let's look at the network server application and the program client application. So there's also another diagram from the Bank of America that this is how it looks like. I paste these two side by side because on the left-hand side, figure 2 is the individual end user using the distributed ledger technology application, which is this mobile device. You can see here that there will definitely be a network interface with a transmitter and a receiver and a blockchain network interface and a power source, which if you put it into a criminal context, that will be the neural cells that is powering it. And so this is really unlawful. And it's like the bodily sovereignty, and not everyone will want this. Okay, and then you can see here, I put this side by side with the financial institution app. So the financial institution workers, they are also microchipped, and they are using computers as well to run their financial institutions. And you can see here that this is the Bank of America's depiction of what it can look like diagrammatically on the network server app and the financial institution program client app. So again, you can see this here, it states clearly that this is the financial institution system. So this Bank of America pattern can be used by other financial institutions, right? That's why it's the pattern for like some other banks or other financial institutions, they like this, they may just take this. So this is what it looks like. That's why it's a general term here, FI. There's a network communication interface processing device. So it is a computer. The computer contains a processor and a controller, and it will also contain a memory in order to store the database. And you'll be linked to a server. There will be a server application. There's an authentication application. There's customer authentication data, account number, banking, mobile banking application, blockchain interface, and a web server application and downloadable distributed network program client application. So I put this end user DLT app with the financial institutions conceptual diagram of their app linked to the network server app. Okay, let's just look at the law. What does the American law says on the criminal computer dollar model? Very clearly stated in the document title that it is anti-surveillance state act under the US Congress. So I took out a relevant extract. Okay, sorry, just before I wrap off, I also want to I have wanted to just now when I first mentioned Bank of America, I would also like to insert the Microsoft definition of the distributed ledger technology, which did not give a diagrams like the Bank of America, but nonetheless they have a definition, so it is useful to cross-reference with Microsoft's version of their definition of what the distributed ledger technology mean, and in reference to the quick-let identity in relation to, in context, the bodily activity data, which is laid out in the Microsoft WO, meaning European Patent 666, which I will also explain in a separate category of telecommunications companies. So the Microsoft patent quick-let identity defines distributed ledger technology as a distributed ledger itself, a database of transactions. For example, exchanges of assets or data replicated and synchronized across nodes of a distributed network. Each node maintains a complete copy of the distributed ledger and updates its copy independently. I repeat, each node maintains a complete copy of the distributed ledger and updates its copy independently. It manages a database of transactions, which comprises of exchanges of assets or data replicated and synchronized across the nodes of the distributed ledger network. So this is the definition offered by Microsoft in quick-let identity. there will be a computation logic of controller and processor and cryptographic hashes and consensus algorithms to keep disparate copies of the distributed ledger in sync. A consensus algorithm under the Microsoft given definition is employed to ensure that nodes agree on the order and the content of ledger updates. So this is a very good cross-reference because it then matches the key conceptual definitive gives a clearer and clearer understanding of all these key concepts, right? So it is also mentioned in when we cross-reference the Microsoft definition that to keep the disparate copies of the distributed ledger, a consensus algorithm is employed to ensure the nodes agree. All right, so you can see here the nodes under the permission and permissionless permission and the permissionless blockchain that appears in the Computer Bank of England and the Reserve Bank of New York brochure-like documents with some important key but very short extracts and expanded explanation can be cross-referenced using alternate registered companies. So under the Microsoft, in addition to the Bank of America's explanation of the distributed ledger technology, Microsoft goes on to explain that this consensus algorithm employed to ensure the nodes agree, which is like in the diagrammatical illustration registered under IPM, agree on the order and content of the ledger updates. The cryptographic hashes and the digital signatures are used to allow easy detection of data tampering and to ensure recorded transactions in the distributed ledger originated from their stated senders. So this is a general definition, and it will be further explored in the Microsoft 666 pattern because then it will lay out that there is access to the bodily cells and organs, which also ties into this ancient replica and copy, which is also inbuilt into the architecture for binary computer programming. All right, it will be this the bodily cells in the 666 pattern, which also appears in their company brand. All these are ancient replica computer binary, so it is not hidden. It is in their this outer space. This is a very, very simplified outer space map, actually. So let's just continue on with the Microsoft explanation. The cryptographic hashes and digital signatures are used to allow for easy detection of data tampering and to ensure recorded transactions in a distributed ledger originated from the stated senders, meaning including, for example, photon-like quantum key or barcoding binary hashing of your bodily organs and neural cells, which is why you see the flower petal, the lotus petal, and why they use the word secure, meaning they know that it is from the original sender because they actually scan your neural cells and your body cells. And the usage of a combination of these elements is to create a verifiable. We also see the verification flow in the IBM diagram. Immutable transaction history that does not require a central authority. So this is the Microsoft's definition of distributed ledger technology, which also states an additional feature that they don't require a central authority, which then becomes like a fully computer run thing. So this is also let me just these are like brand specific. They will add additional feature like, okay, this is the reason why there's no need. There's like selling, okay, there's this thing that they're selling and maybe some people take note of this. So examples of so just some final note on the Microsoft given definition of distributed ledger technology includes, okay, so some keywords like Ethereum, which is also laid out in the, it is on the IBM portal, Hyperledger Fabric, Quorum, Enterprise Ethereum Alliance, R3 Core, Chain Core. So the Cryptlet ID is the definitive and the definition of distributed ledger technology given by Microsoft, registered under Microsoft. And we will eventually look at the 666 Microsoft pattern, and which then also will open up some discussion on organ damage control, the collected body data of vectors and parameters for computation logic, and also like the e-reward system, which is smart money. Okay, so now we can then close off 11.3 with the American law on the criminal computer dollar. It's a computerized digits essentially, and it is attempt to put it into the Computer Reserve Bank of New York, which is essentially just a computer set or apparatus setup. So this is the official document from the House of Representatives, the law, the Federal Reserve Act to prohibit Federal Reserve banks from offering products or services directly to individual and for other purposes. And I took out the relevant extract. The Federal Reserve in section, I'll just read from the extract, the relevant portion. So it states clearly that there is a prohibition in the 11th Congress with the original signature of the member. In the second session, it clearly states that the Federal Reserve Act, of course, like this is just a important extract, but if one were to fully study the entire Federal Reserve, then you have to go all the way back to the Federal Reserve history when it first came about, and before it could then have a Federal Reserve Act to begin with. So then this is to amend it, and it states clearly that the American law is to prohibit Federal Reserve banks from offering products or services, which also covers the Computer Federal Reserve Bank brochure, right? Which is actually a forum. It clearly stated that it is a forum, that to offer products or services directly to an individual or for any other purposes. So if you're a microchip with a Hyperledger Fabric in brain, that is offering services directly, and that is going direct. And it says to, again, this bill, it states in larger font to amend the Federal Reserve Act to prohibit the Federal Reserve Banks from offering certain products or services directly to an individual or other purposes. You can also think in terms of like, because this banks here initially was a physical building with lots of computers, but now it is the electronic, it's turned electronic banks, and there is an attempt using a forum containing a conceptual diagram of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, and also you can cross-reference it with the Computer Bank of England to using a set of computers that we have seen so far in all the decentralized ledger technology without even clearly stated requiring a central authority to just be able to do some transactions using barcode, binary code, barcode, scanning, hashing, photonic, radio frequency, telecommunications to be able to do it directly. And there's a prohibition on Federal Reserve banks relating to certain products on certain services from individuals. Okay, so the key is here. It prohibits the Federal Reserve banks, which is chipped, or there is some leakage of some diagrammatical designs that it has been chipped, because you can clearly compare with this is like the Bank of England chipped. So and also all these other diagrams that we have seen with the evidence from the meeting from the mortuary, with the microchip from the injectables. So again, here you can see the relevant sections. Federal Reserve Bank may not offer products or services directly to an individual. Maintain an account on behalf of the individual. Issue a central bank digital currency directly to an individual. It states here very clearly not to issue a CBDC directly to an individual. This is the American law, even on the Federal Reserve Bank. So it states here clearly, I repeat, the Section 13 of the Federal Reserve Act is specifically authorized not to offer product services directly to an individual, maintain an account on behalf of an individual, or issue a central bank digital currency, which is not money actually. It's legally not considered money. It's just computerized digits. So they're not authorized, specifically authorized under the Act not to issue a central bank digital currency, CBDC, directly to an individual. Okay, and here again, I extract this out. Very, very important section, because it relates to the term economy, economies, industries, with the letter E in the WEF. Prohibition on the use of CBDC, central bank digital currency, for monetary policy. This is very, very important, because you cannot use like the bodily cells for some computer Tom that wants not just bodily cells, but he wants the world economies, all the industries, for his personal monetary policy. It states here, let me read, Section 10 of the Federal Reserve Act inserts before paragraph 12 the following 11. Prohibition on the use of central bank digital currency for monetary policy. The Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System and the Federal Open Market Committee may not use any central bank digital currency or CBDC or microchipping to implement monetary policy. Meaning, you cannot use like microchipping to have anything to do with like adjusting some monetary variables at a national level. It's illegal, because you are using like you're trespassing the bodily sovereignty of an entire nations just to commit adjustment of any of the monetary variables at a national level. This is outlawed. It is banned. Okay, I will end here for a short while, and when I come back, I will explain in more technical comparative analysis for clarification with crossover models from Model D Bank of Computer Bank of Russia, the Computer Bank of England model brochure, using various registered assortment of banks, merchant cards, telecommunications, chip companies, to explore and explain in more depth, in detail, technical, entailing some criminal issues on invading the human body, sovereignty. These are very good companies, diagrammatical and detailed technical explanations to offer alternate cross-reference as to what the Computer Bank of England brochure-like document with important but too short descriptions. These are very good ways to cross-reference in great depth and more details to explain what these brochure-like Computer Bank of England, the Computer Reserve Bank of New York, and with input from the Computer Bank of Russia Model D can mean in some of the keywords that appears. So we will be looking at, for instance, what is the keyword that appears programmability with sandbox, oracle, event listener by using a cross-reference explanatory with diagrams and examples and descriptions, using all these other companies that I picked, for example, JP Morgan, American Express, Microsoft, IBM, Visa, and to explain Ethereum, Hyperledger, UTXO, Mbridge, Elias, P2P, which appears in the Computer Bank of England brochure, and also in the other computer bank models. So I will just end here for a short while and come back. I will touch on 11.4 and then 11.5. Thank you.